Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's RD2RD Live Show. My name is Megan Boitano, and we are taking on the topic of insurance billing basics for registered dietitians. And this is a topic, the topic of reimbursement, payment has been something we've brought on the show before, but today we've kind of doing things a little bit different. We've got Maggie Gleason from SimplePractice on. And what I really wanted her to come on today is one, she has a really awesome background as a professional biller. So knowing kind of the ins and outs of claims and payment and all of kind of those nuts and bolts, not as a registered dietitian, but kind of from that other side, as well as electronic health records. So there's a lot of confusion about what do they do for you when it comes to billing insurance. Can you send the bill directly? Are you generating forms to mail in? Are you downloading a electronic format to use a clearinghouse, tracking what's been paid and what's not, and what's the best fit for my practice? And do I have to have one or the other? I hear so many questions in a lot of the groups that I'm in. And I wanted to start to unravel this a little bit with Maggie, because SimplePractice is an electronic health record and does a few different things when it comes to insurance billing. So that is a ton, and we don't have a lot of time. So we're going to dive in, but before, a few little housekeeping. We want your questions, so be sure if you have something burning to drop it in the comments section. That being said, we're not going to get super nitty gritty on your, if you have a really specific problem in your state or with a claim, we're going to be a little bit more broad, global, that could be applicable to everyone who might be listening in today. But I'm going to keep an eye on the questions while Maggie answers the ones that I've already prepared. So Maggie, that was a lot. Thank you for being here. I want to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how why this topic is important to you, and just take it away.
Great. Thanks, Megan, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here. Unlike a lot of people, I do love talking about insurance billing. It's a subject I'm very passionate about. So I've been working in the healthcare industry since about for the last 5 years. I started working on the patient benefit side. So when I initially got started, I was working with the insurance companies in a call center capacity, sort of working at this concierge service, helping insurance members, so patients, understand their benefits and understand the bills that they would get from healthcare providers, and help them with accessing affordable care, helping them understanding their explanation of benefits. And then I transitioned into becoming a medical biller, supporting a variety of health and wellness providers, from behavioral health through physical therapy and dietitians as well. And then I started working with SimplePractice in 2017 and transitioned into a role of supporting health and wellness providers understand how they can support their clients on a multiple levels. So with insurance billing, as well as using a practice management software to run their private practice and grow their business.
Got it. Wow. I That's an interesting transition. I always love, you can totally see the elements that prepared you for what you're doing now. I always love to hear people's story and journey, because you never just popped up in the role you're in. So that's great. Thanks for sharing. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start out a little bit broad and just give an overview. I think we want to talk about billing and we want to talk about claims, but the steps for a dietitian who accepts insurance, what does it really look like? Kind of start to finish, let's say from the time a client calls to the time you get paid. If you're, looking at not being a cash-based dietitian and you want to accept, insurance and bill. What does that process look like?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, the most important thing you want to get big picture is to understand what services are generally are and are not covered through insurance. So in order for insurance to reimburse you, your client must have a valid medical diagnosis. So that means that they should be referred to usually by another doctor or their primary care doctor for a specific concern. And that falls under the realm of medical nutritional therapy rather than something like nutritional education or a client that may come to you for lifestyle changes or improvements. So as long as your services fall in that realm and your clients are coming to you with a valid diagnosis, then you should be in good shape. The next thing you want to do is decide what insurance panels you want to work with. And this may vary depending on what type of patients you want to see. And it also will vary depending on the region that you're in. So I think it's helpful to look at, again, assess who you want to treat, determine what the most popular insurance carriers are in your area. Usually there's big employers in your area, or if you know that you like working with seniors, people with disabilities, then you want to consider Medicare. If you want to work with people who are underserved, then Medicaid is a good option for you. Otherwise, a lot of people are under the conception that the misconception that when you're just getting started, it's best to panel with as many insurance companies as possible because that makes your services more accessible to more people. But that's usually not the case. Usually that will just cause more confusion. That's a lot of insurance companies to have to juggle. So I recommend picking a maximum of 3 or 4 to get started with. And even that is kind of a lot to take on. You may just want to start with 1, see how that works for you, see how working with those clients, and then if you're able to grow from there. Like it is a big time commitment. So you really need to understand that when you're paneling, it can take a couple months, in fact.
Or more.
But it's a lot of paperwork. I've seen anywhere from like a dedication of up to 40 hours alone on paperwork for these insurance companies. And you want to make sure to be really, really diligent about the paperwork that you're doing. They would need to see all of your credentials. They need to see your license. And just everything about you, and they like really need to dig into the type of services that you're going to be providing, and then they determine whether or not there's space on their panels. Panels open and close, so it varies by time of year. So take that into consideration as well. So just getting started, don't jump the gun. Don't promote yourself as an insurance provider to your clients until you absolutely have that paperwork signed and you are officially paneled. And then from there, it starts all the fun stuff of verifying benefits and understanding what services you intend to offer.
Mm-hmm. I think I think you made a really good point about choosing a few. I know personally, I did something very similar. I picked 3 to get paneled, to get credentialed with, and even that felt, keeping all of, you get emails from them, like you have to go into the portal update. There's all this stuff. I can't imagine managing 10. I think it would be mind-boggling.
And there are services that you can employ to help you with the credentialing process, but you still need to be very involved.
Yeah.
And I recommend following up. If you haven't heard back in weeks,
Yeah.
call, check in. Always get a reference number. Always take down the name of the person that you talked to at the insurance company so you can follow up with that information.
And we've had a couple of other shows on about kind of this credentialing process. So today I really want to talk about kind of the claims and, that type of stuff in the electronic health record element, because I think it's something that doesn't get enough attention. So for those of you who have credentialing questions, I know it's a pain point, but we're gonna set that aside a little bit. But we were kind of walking through the process, right, of figuring out, from start to finish, right? You've got decided which panels you're going to try to get on, and then this kind of authorization, eligibility checks, that type of stuff. How does that fit into kind of the claims process as you see it? Like what happens there?
Yeah, so I know that verifying benefits and understanding what is covered can be one of the biggest challenges for providers working with insurance. So one thing that's important is never assume that because you have one client with a Blue Cross plan that the next time you have a client with a Blue Cross plan, you're going to get paid. Always verify. So a lot of insurance companies, you can do that online. You can verify the client's eligibility, but most times that's not enough to just verify the eligibility. You also want to make sure that the service that you're going to be provided is covered. And most times your clients will have no idea because they don't make that information super accessible or readily available. So in that case, you'll want to call the insurance company. I think it's really, really imperative that you have a copy of the client's ID card. That should always be your first step in working with clients with insurance. And I recommend collecting that before you even start seeing the client. So have them send you a copy of their insurance card, and then you'll want to call to verify exactly what services you intend to offer, and check with the insurance company by calling and giving that information and understanding if there's a limitation. So authorization requirements vary by plan. Some plans require it right off the bat, and they want to know what you're treating the client for, how long you intend to treat them. Others will say, okay, medical nutritional therapy is covered for 4 hours for the benefit year, or for 4 sessions. And that again, that's just a generalization that can vary. And what will happen is if you see it that the client would needs to have beyond what the allowed amount of benefit is, that's when you would need to authorize the service, and you'll want to work with the prescribing physician to put together a plea for medical necessity to the insurance company. And that process is generally straightforward with submitting an authorization. It's just about creating that case and being as detailed as possible. Again, working with the prescribing physician to put together why it is medically necessary for the client to continue in treatment, and how long you like when your follow-up will be, how many more sessions you think that they'll need to have, and why that number.
Right. Those are some really good points. I think what you said, and reiterating, like, don't assume, right? Just because someone has United or Blue Cross Blue Shield that they're going to get the similar benefits to another client that you have with Blue Cross Blue Shield, because that's probably may not be the case, in my own personal experience.
Yeah. And just to touch on that, so it varies, but private insurance companies versus government issued insurance companies.
Right.
With private insurance, it's usually either purchased, the patient either pays for that out of pocket, or it's created through their employer, and their employers are the ones that make those plans.
Right.
So it's the employers that get to decide what benefits they want to offer. So it's not always necessarily United Healthcare. It's a United Healthcare plan that an employer had say in what kind of services they would like to offer, based on like what is available through that insurance company.
Right. And I think we touched a little bit here on kind of types of insurance. I don't want to dig too much into that, but kind of if you want, you made a good point. Personally, I'm not in network with United, let's say. I'm not. But I had a certain plan that a client had that was United, but through a partnership had access to another provider network that I was in network with. Yep. So because they were in the state I lived in, they had to use the network that I was a part of, but then billing got really complicated because do you bill? So things are different. Like, people create interesting partnerships to have access to different provider networks. So just like you said, you have to call. I know some people put this on the client to do the eligibility verification, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I think it's important to have your client involved and engaged in the insurance process, but I don't think that it should be their sole responsibility, because that is where you'll run into issues. So if you want to avoid errors with denials or rejections, it's important to follow up as well. So I think it's helpful to have both people involved. So tell your client to make sure to call their insurance company and verify their coverage, and then you also do the same. So if you're expecting your client to do it, you should also do that. And then if you have conflicting information based on what your client is telling you and what you gathered from the insurance, you can involve your client in that as well. So you have those reference numbers you can hand off to your client and say, look, I spoke to your insurance. This is the information I've been given. please follow up to make sure that I wasn't given anything in error. At the insurance company, it's two separate departments. It's provider relations and member relations. So that does happen. One agent may tell your client that they have coverage. You may be told that they don't. So always make sure that you do your due diligence, have your client check in, but also I think it's really important that you check in as well, because you don't want to just be going off of he said, she said.
Right. Actually, personally, having that benefits eligibility process, as laborious and time consuming as it is, it was very educational for me as a provider, to learn each one of those calls and some of the lingo and different things.
And you start to get good at it. You start to figure out like what process makes the most sense for you.
Right.
If you know you work with one insurance company, sometimes you can just bundle all of that together. And I recommend trying to fit that into your schedule as best as you can. You can do all those calls at the beginning of the week, at the end of the week, and like kind of figuring out when the best times to call. I find Wednesday is a good time to call, either really early in the morning if you're on the East Coast, later in the day if you're on the West Coast. You have to figure time zones.
Yeah, so let's talk about office procedures here. So you're calling, you're taking down reference numbers, you're asking about different things. How do you keep things straight? Like what, if you're, doing this on paper versus a health record, what are some best practices for kind of just organizing? There's a lot of pieces of information you're kind of juggling, where people are in the process, how many visits or hours have I submitted this? There's a lot.
Yeah. So I think that the more systems you involve in this process, the more complicated things will get and the more room there is for error. So if you are balancing your notes in one place, your calendar in one place, and your billing in another place, that's where things tend to fall through the cracks. If you're writing things down, that's where things tend to fall through the cracks. So with the practice management system, the intention is to really put that all into one place, and to really integrate that whole process so that everything is in one place. And that's what electronic health records do. So you have your schedule, you have your notes, and you have your billing all in one place. You have the ability to write notes about calls with insurance companies right in your client's record. And that's a feature that SimplePractice includes. You can make little chart notes. You can also track authorizations there, so that okay, I have 12 sessions that expire at the end of the year. You can set a reminder to let yourself know when that will follow up. So I think best practice is using a system that's fully integrated, and that you can track your claims in the same place that you keep your notes. You can track your claims in the same place that you have your schedule. You can also track your explanation of benefits, how much you're getting paid, all under one roof as well.
So let's kind of dig in a little bit. I want to differentiate the different ways that you can do insurance billing. It's a little bit of a maze, right?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I bill insurance for, like, what is that? Like, how does that happen? So talk me through some of the different ways you can submit your bill.
Sure. So the first way is by paper. That's the oldest oldest method there is. So that is when you actually take a paper claim and you mail that to the insurance company. That you'll see your slowest turnaround in terms of, because you're relying on the postal system. You're also relying on the insurance company to get that. They have to scan it in. They have to look over your claim before it goes through the process of adjudication, determining whether or not they'll pay it. There's also using a clearinghouse directly. So some systems like Office Ally, you can submit claims for free. That's when you submit online. They're all standardized through the CMS 1500 form, but when you're doing it online, it puts it into a secure file that gets sent through the insurance company. When you're working with an EHR system, it's similar to working with like an Office Ally or a clearinghouse. You just do that directly from your system where you have your client records, and you are able to populate your claims automatically based on what you have in the record for the client. So it pulls in your sessions. Whereas if you're working with an Office Ally, you'll have to enter that information in manually, just by typing it in, taking it out of one place and putting it into another. with an EHR, it's already there. So you you click create a claim. You have a chance to review the claim beforehand, and it puts it into a form that's like easy to see, easy to look through, easy to spot for errors, and then you submit that. What happens? It will go through a clearinghouse, and that is a service that either is required by an insurance company or is required by the EHR. Sometimes there's two. Like sometimes it has to go from one clearinghouse to another clearinghouse. They're there to help ensure that the claims are scrubbed for errors, that the client has benefits, and like kind of help prevent any roadblocks before it gets to the insurance company, and then it gets to the insurance company, and then that's when they review it. Um, so that's like an overview, kind of.
Yeah. And I think I gotta digest a little bit. So
Yeah, that's a
if you
lot.
have like a paper claim, right? You said you could mail it. So there's the option of like handwriting a paper claim, which
Yeah,
they get paid too, right?
yeah, definitely.
However, there's also the option of you can mail a paper claim that you generated electronically through
Yes.
some kind of a practice management tool. I have done that for out of network. Someone wanted to see me despite the fact that I was out of network. I saw them. I didn't want to deal with it. I was just going to mail it to the address that they had. It was just easier. It was a one-off.
Yes.
So it had typed in, easy to generate, just print it, dropped it in the mail, right?
Yes.
Then you mentioned there's some other clearinghouses. So something like Office Ally, where if you some of the practice management tools allow you to create what's kind of like a clearinghouse friendly electronic file, where
Yes.
instead of having to rekey everything about it, your claims, you just upload and it kind of pre-populates everything. So some of the electronic health records allow you to generate that
Mhm.
versus another way you can do it, and I've done this if you don't take very many insurance companies and they offer it, is a provider portal where you can actually bill directly through an electronic. Some offer it, some don't.
Yeah. So you can go
Um,
directly to the
you
insurance company. Yeah.
you can bill it that way electronically. And then you mentioned kind of this other, option is submitting a bill directly within your electronic health record. And this was something that caused me like major confusion when I was starting my private practice, because they say that they offer like the, claims, but there's a difference between being able to generate a CMS 1500 or create like an Office Ally upload friendly electronic file versus actually being able to, in your electronic health record, submit a claim. And I just really want you to kind of talk about the difference. And I think it's a point that people don't really understand until they're kind of further along in the process.
Sure. So when we talk about creating like a clearinghouse friendly file, what happens with with an integrated EHR where you submit your claims directly is that they are still integrated with that clearinghouse. You just don't see that process. So
Right.
you don't have to actually manually go through and upload that file. The process is
And figure out, like, did it get submitted? Was it reimbursed? Like, there's a lot of back end work.
yeah. So the integration is behind the scenes. So what you see is a claim that's created, and it looks like a regular CMS 1500 that's put into that format, and then you click submit, and it goes directly to the insurance company through through whatever clearinghouse your EHR is integrated with, um, and you're able to follow along with the claim status within your EHR. So the statuses that you'll see are scrubbed if there's an error. You'll see rejected if the clearinghouse doesn't accept the claim, and then denied if the insurance company doesn't see the claim, or and then you'll see accepted if the clearinghouse accepts it, and you'll see paid once the insurance company gets it and pays it.
Right.
There's lots of different statuses you can see, but the most important thing to know is you can track that all in there.
So differentiate, I know, being part of SimplePractice, how is that process different maybe than other health records that are out there for registered dietitians? Like, I know Calix and not Simple Calix, Practice Better, Healthy. What's different about that process?
I think the best feature that we offer is the ability to track your claims, your statuses as they go. So the process of creating and submitting is very simple. And then from there, you can actually watch your claims and get updates as they go along. We're also integrated to receive remittance advice. So that's a fancy word for an explanation of benefits. And that is an even fancier word for basically just an overview of what got paid and what didn't.
And that's more from the provider side versus as a member, you get like a kind of an EOB.
Members get it too. Members always get copied on it. So like if you are a patient that gets healthcare services, you'll always get that from your insurance company. Providers get it too. It's just a receipt basically of what got paid and what didn't. Mm-hmm. Now your payments are always going to come directly through the insurance. You'll never get a payment through your EHR, but what being connected to receive remittance advices does is takes the accounting, takes that extra step of having to get the checks, you got paid, and then enter it into the system. It does that for you.
And then go, was there, do I need to bill any remainder for the client? Did I get the copay? Did the card get all that?
Yep. So it does all that for you. Okay. It takes the kind of the guessing out of figuring out what does this all mean? Like, what is this benefit? What is this?
Got it.
It'll add that to their account for you. And then it will let the client know as well what they know.
So we've talked a little bit about this claim submission process, but I want to get just a little bit more granular and just talk a little bit more about a claim. You're like, well, they're standardized or CMS 1500 form. What exactly is this claim versus coding versus charges? You started talking about remittance advices and well, let's just break this down and talk a little bit more about some of those elements.
So a claim, simply put, is the summary of everything that you're doing with an individual client. So the claim should tell the story of who you are, who your client is, what the service was, and what the service was for. So it is standardized, so every claim will have the same field that you need to fill out. When I say once the claim should tell who you are, that requires your MPI, your tax ID, your name, your office address, where services were rendered. When we talk about who the client is, that should have the client's full demographics, their name, date of birth, their insurance ID number, their if they have their plan through someone else, you'll need that information.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget to get that.
Yes.
I've never done that.
All of that needs to be spot on, exactly correct, or else the insurance will deny. And that's probably where we see the most denials, is just in errors with what is on the claim and what was collected from your client. So it's really, really important. And that's where the verification process is so crucial, to make sure that you have the ID number right, because they don't make them easy. They don't make them scannable. They're usually like 14 alphanumeric like code that has no rhyme or reason. So make sure you have that down pat, and then always keep a copy of the card on file so you can refer back to that. And then make sure that your client knows, if they're not the policyholder, they know their policyholder's demographic information, because you will be surprised how many husbands or wives don't know the right birthday, or don't know their kids' birthdays. That's a big
you made a good point about getting all this information, and part of, you talked about an integrated system, of forms, right? If you're collecting this information from your clients before the visit using kind of secure forms, it makes it easier to get back to that information all under one roof. Yes. And I hear, kind of small little tangent, I hear a lot of dietitians that, want to get their practice started for as little as possible, and really want to try to do a lot of things on paper or not have to invest in a practice management tool. Being someone who always looks at what is the process that I'm setting up scalable. So if you get busier, there's a lot to be said for, can you put the gas pedal down on your current process without, and will that process serve you well? So, if you're putting a piecemeal process together that you're able to do now, how are you going to scale your practice up going forward? And most of, these tools, if you're seeing a few clients a month even, can really help you focus on other things that can help you to kind of grow your business. Just little Little
Yeah, definitely.
tangent there.
I mean, time is money, and that's something to consider. Insurance is a big time commitment, but you can save yourself the headache by automating some of that process and eliminating human error as much as possible.
Yeah. So a lot of like there's just so much that these practice
Yep.
management tools do that, I'm a huge fan of they allow you to create a process that's scalable. They don't they're very flexible though as well. So if you have to think through what you want your process to look like and then structure the different components to fit you and your practice. So they're not just going to say here's how to do it. You still have to figure some of that out yourself.
Yes. Yep. You still definitely need to be engaged.
Yes. So I interrupted you. You're talking about claims, coding, charges, that kind of stuff. And you're
Yeah.
talking about the most common reason claims get denied. And I definitely want to kind of dive more into that too.
Yeah. So again, I said demographic information, like errors in member IDs, are a big reason that claims get denied. So it's important to understand what you need to collect and get all of that up front. The member ID is usually the prominent number on the insurance ID card. There will be a few other numbers on there. There's the group ID, and there's some things that like plan ID. They don't really mean anything. You don't need those. For most insurance companies, and the CMS usually doesn't have space for those extra numbers. So make sure you have the right number. Then the next thing, coding describes the services that were rendered and also the diagnoses. So the service will be represented by a CPT code, a current procedural terminology. That's what that stands for. And every service that is billable to insurance will have a CPT code. And those CPT codes will either be time-based or service-based. So understanding what type of services you offer and whether or not you have to bill it in time-based codes. We usually just represent a block saying like this code represents 45 minutes and that you will just use one unit of. And you want to make sure to understand that based on what you offer. Service-based codes need to be billed in units. So if they're broken down by time intervals. So that gets a little more complicated. Just
Right.
understanding what you offer and how that will work.
Right. So kind of that 15-minute increments. And I think, your initial, one of the things different insurers allow a different amount of time for initial visits. And, even talking to local dietitians, I was told one thing. And when I called the insurance myself and asked, it was different. I could actually bill an additional 15 minutes for that first session.
Mhm.
So I think figuring out how many units you can bill, you can charge for, and structuring your visits, around that to make sure that you have enough time for the visit, but also, you know,
Yeah.
getting what you
And it's
can.
helpful, it's helpful to try to understand that when you're first getting started with an insurance company so that you have all of that clarified, and you don't need to like double check every time.
Hmm.
So try to get that information just based on what they allow,
Right.
based on your contract with them right off the bat.
Right. And just some other little nuggets from, the medical policy. Most of your insurance companies actually have a very, very, very detailed policy that will tell you, with the CPT code, specific ICD-10 like diagnoses. So whether it's obesity with the specific ICD-10 code, or whatever their list of diagnoses that they allow, oftentimes asking that representative if they could, send you a link, or where could I find that, they'll walk you through on their website. Usually it's buried, and you can actually see that, especially if you've had a claim that maybe was rejected, that you're just like, wait a minute, they had coverage, that it might just be getting a diagnosis clarification from the physician, or if it's already in their medical record. Just some little, it
Yeah,
takes time, and I think there's a learning curve no matter what. Like with anything, it's going to be a little bit, you learn a lot at the beginning, so kind of planning extra time. And there is a reason some people outsource the billing process to somebody else, but I also think it's really good to have some foundational knowledge as a provider,
mhm.
um, just so that you understand what's happening behind the
Definitely.
scenes.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about the diagnoses. You want to be mindful about what you're getting from the prescribing physician and making sure that it's detailed and matches what's in the medical policy. I would say be weary of preventative codes and always check to make sure that that is covered through insurance. Preventative diagnosis codes usually start with a Z, and coverage for that varies a lot. So most times insurance companies will want to see a chronic condition, and a preventative code won't capture that. But there may, if the client may have an underlying chronic condition, you want to get that from the physician.
Right. Yeah, it makes a good point about asking about both. If you're calling for an eligibility check, which done, they say no, this client doesn't have any coverage for 97802, right, which is initial nutrition assessment, and then you decide to follow up and say, well, do they have any coverage for preventative? And then they'll go, oh yeah, 9702 is covered for unlimited amounts, and you're like, well, you could have told me that. They're not necessarily, they answer only the question you ask. There's no
Yes.
additional information is shared with you. That's a little bit robotic at times. So,
Yes.
um, just
Yep.
things like
And
that.
I recommend making a script for yourself for
Yep.
calling insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
We put together one on the SimplePractice blog, for verifying eligibility and also checking benefits.
Ooh, we should link to
And
that.
yeah, you can find that. I'll send you a link if
Okay.
you want to put it in the
We'll put it in
comments.
comments. Yep.
Okay.
Definitely on your blog, a script for that, because I think it's helpful to have kind of a general idea of what to be asking.
Definitely.
Um, okay, so I'm gonna get back to my questions, but let's kind of. Ooh, I heard a beep. That was really loud. I don't know what that
Oh,
was.
sorry, that was me.
Sorry if everyone else heard that as well. So, what are some other problems that you see most commonly for claims not getting paid, and other kind of submission tips?
um, so like I said, sorry, I'm just looking back at my notes. And trying to silence the beeping.
Oh, it's you. I was like,
um, so errors in how the claims are recorded is really the number one reason. Eligibility lapse is another. So at the
oh,
end of the year, it's really important to understand what plans are changing and whether your clients are getting new insurance, what their terms of service are going to be. So now is the time to start looking into that. And now is the time to really start following up with your clients, involving them in the process, making sure that they know what their plan year is and if they're going to get a new plan, who it's going to be through. I see a lot of issues with that, and also coordination of benefits. That's what it's called when a client has multiple insurance. So what will happen is a client will either have insurance through their own employer, and then they'll also have it through their spouse, or if it's a child, they can have insurance through both parents.
hmm.
There's always going to be one that is primary and always will be one that's secondary.
Ooh,
And
let's talk about that process, like the primary,
sure, that one
secondary.
was a doozy. So what happens is you don't get to pick which insurance is primary and which is secondary. There are very strict rules around what is allowed within coordination of benefits, and your clients might not know that. So a lot of times we see clients that just have two insurance. They think, great, I'm doubly covered. Here's both cards. Um, so you really need to work either with the insurance companies or with the client and understanding and reviewing the coordination of benefits rules. Um, it, you can view them on CMS, which is Medicare's resource. They're kind of the governing body for insurance billing. Not every private insurance follows exactly the CMS rules, but most do, and most follow those coordination of benefits rules. So that is really important to get straight before you even start billing, because you'll find
Because
a
when they
nightmare.
say just bill this insurance because it has coverage, or no, yeah, no.
And what also happens is some insurance companies will deny flat out for coordination of benefits without the client even having other insurance. And that's because they send a survey out to all members at the beginning of the year. You may experience this yourself if you're insured, just asking you if you have any other insurance. They want to know if they're going to be sharing the cost with anyone. And if you don't reply, or if your client doesn't reply, insurance companies will start automatically denying claims until they get that information from their member. there's nothing that you can do to take action other than tell your client they need to talk to their insurance company and they need to complete their coordination of benefits. And they can do that simply by calling the number on the back of their card. It's usually an automated prompt that they can just say, if they don't have any other insurance, then no, and move on. But that is a huge denial reason, and you can really get stuck in a cycle with that for a while.
It's good to know.
Yes. That's,
So,
again, coordination of benefits. I know it's a little confusing. When you call insurance, they'll refer to it as COB or this and that. They'll tell you your client just needs to complete that. So that's why it's important, I think, to always have your clients looped into the process and engaged.
yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. So we are, oh my gosh, getting close to the end of our time today. This is such a big topic and fun. But if we talked about issues with claims, but I think just, you work with a lot of health providers, including dietitians in your role as SimplePractice. Kind of the mistakes that you see, what do you kind of help pull them out of, help get clever? What mistakes do you see that you want listeners to know about so that they might avoid them?
So I would say don't let things escalate. Like don't let things slide. That's what the biggest mistake I see a lot of our customers make is continuing to treat a client, continuing treatment with someone when they have this big mess with their insurance and they're not sure what's going on with it. And that's where you can end up costing yourself a lot more. And you may never get that claim result. Like that, sometimes you just have to accept that something is not going to get paid, or you never will get paid, and figure out what you want to do about that. So work something out with your client, have that difficult conversation with them. I know a lot of people are insistent, keep trying with my insurance, but be realistic. If it's been 3 months and you haven't gotten paid for any of the services, you need to check in and you need to determine what the best course of action is for that.
I think you make a really good point here. So setting expectations, that I'm billing insurance as a convenience for you, right?
Yes.
I am in network, but you're not saying, I'm going to get paid and you're not going to have to pay anything, or this is the copay. Like, I think you should be realistic that, this might or might not get covered. And I think sometimes it's scary to have that conversation so that you're not like surprising them with the fact that, it wasn't paid, right?
Yes. And that's something that you always want to build into your intake paperwork, is just saying that ultimately, if a service is not covered, this is your responsibility, and just
And I think it really rolls nicely into, we have this thing about getting all the paperwork done before the client comes in for their visit, and that way we have lots of time. I use a good amount of that first visit of going through paperwork and having that conversation face to face about a little bit, about the, billing and how this might work, and I'm going to take your credit card. Like, I think we're afraid to talk about it, and we can kind of put it all in the electronic realm before the visit and then kind of ignore it.
Yep.
I think it's a great opportunity to review the paperwork with them in the electronic format, because I try to reduce the amount of non-paid time I'm spending before
Definitely.
clients, because the reality is when I show up to my doctor or the orthodontist, like I did with my son, like they go through the paperwork and I'm not insulted. I'm not like, oh, how dare you be using this visit time to talk about paperwork? Like, it's expected. And I think we gotta, I don't know why we have this really big problem with, I gotta have everything all done before the first visit.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of an informed healthcare consumer is an empowered healthcare consumer. So that really contributes to that.
Yeah. So this has been really good. So before we go, I want you to talk about SimplePractice, some of the resources that you have that people can grab, and a little bit more about your practice management platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I touched on this a little bit, but SimplePractice is fully integrated as a practice management system. So it's everything from your scheduling, your note taking, insurance billing, and client billing. Insurance billing is obviously one of our strongest features, but beyond that, we have a great process for billing your clients. So invoicing, generating super bills if you're billing out of network. To learn more about SimplePractice, you can go to simplepractice.com/dietitians to get the more tailored understanding of how we work with RDs. We also have a really great blog with tons of resources. And if you're someone that is just getting started in private practice and have questions about that, we put together a really great video series with one of our RD customers all about the different things that you need to consider with private practice. And for that, I'll send you the link, but you can go to simplepractice.com/how-to. It's how-to. And that's a 15-part video series all about everything from malpractice insurance to taking insurance to billing your clients to marketing your practice, everything that you need to know. So we really want to help people get themselves off the ground and empower them as healthcare entrepreneurs beyond just being a practice management system.
Right. That's I think you gave us so much to think about today when it comes to claims, and I get it that it does feel overwhelming. However, I have seen some comments coming through about it is scary and there is a lot to learn. The consequences of, I think, question here about doing it wrong. Like, is there anything more than like someone just not getting paid versus you don't know enough to bill and maybe you're considered you were doing fraudulent or you could be taken to court? Like what are some of the consequences maybe we haven't thought about when it comes to billing?
Sure. So the first process, if the insurance is flagged on something that you're doing wrong, you'll be audited, and that's it's like a scary word, a dreaded word to be audited by an
Yeah.
insurance company. But what that means is they'll just, if you're keeping accurate notes and you're very detailed and your
Documentation, right?
documentation is everything. That's what they'll want to see. They want to see your documentation. They'll want to see, where you're getting your clients from, and they'll walk you through that process of what they expect. It's a lot of paperwork, but that's usually the repercussion of if you're making errors. If you're doing things in good faith, then you shouldn't be concerned. And if you are really worried about staying compliant and staying, making sure you're not committing any insurance fraud that you're not aware of, you can work with an insurance biller and you can work with a billing company, and you can outsource that. However, I recommend working with a biller that is willing to work within your EHR or is willing to give you access to see your claims and see your client information. So you never want to just close the door on it. You always want to be involved. I see that mistake a lot of times people make with billers is they kind of give them the reins and let them take it over. But it's still your practice. And you still want to be really engaged and keep an eye on what's going on with your claims.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I've heard people say, I wasn't paid for a few months and then covered this horrible mess because they kind of closed the door. I don't have to deal with this anymore. And the reality is it's still your practice. You made a really good point. So before we wrap up, how can people connect directly with you if they have more questions? How can they get in touch?
Yeah. So you can reach me, Maggie at simplepractice.com. For questions about SimplePractice, insurance billing, whatever. We also have a really great help center, and that is at support.simplepractice.com. You go there, you can see what SimplePractice looks like. You can review all of our resources for using the product. Are using SimplePractice and you have any questions, that's how you can get in touch with our customer success team. You can set up a call with someone to do a video chat. We also have a full team here of insurance specialists. With getting an account set up, we offer free classes as well as demos, and that's all again through support.simplepractice.com.
Awesome. Maggie, this was really helpful. I thank you so much for coming on and kind of diving into a topic that, isn't necessarily maybe as fun as social media marketing or running a webinar, because this is this is the rocks that get in our shoe or the big scary monsters that we choose not to face because it's difficult, but I think in your bio talking about access to care, that accepting insurance makes our services as a registered dietitian accessible. As a mom, as a healthcare, consumer myself, like if, you know, making you can't go to see a physician, if you had to completely pay out of pocket, or you wouldn't. So I think having dietitians choose to be in network makes our services accessible to more people, which we want to, is a benefit. And I think, working together with practice, management tools, supporting each other, answering questions, there's so many generous dietitians in my community that have helped me. I'm out of visits with this client. What do I do? And they're like, this is the form you need. It's really easy. Do this. Like helping each other, like pay it forward, to
Yes.
others. It really makes a big difference. So,
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
so thank you so much for being here today, everyone. We're taking a break through the end of the year. We won't have anything on the schedule until January, but I'll be posting those soon on the events page. All right, Maggie, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye bye, everyone.